Welcome back to Route Double. When we last left off, we started the double route. We started learning what happened to Yuuri way back when. When she opened her eyes, she saw Dr. Tenkawa.
よかった。目を覚ましたのね。
Or specifically, Natsuhiko dived into the memories of after Yuuri, which seems to be legitimately Yuuri. No tricks, no gimmicks, just Yuuri. We thought she was dead for 9 years. We realized that she wasn't dead and grew from it. And now we realized that she was dead. We thought she died. We thought she wasn't dead for 9 years. We realized she was dead and grew from it. And now all of a sudden she's not dead.
私、どうしたんですか?
覚えてないわよね。ラボで火事にあってから丸1日眠っていたのよ。
Yuuri looked around. She appeared to be in a hospital room, but Natsuhiko was nowhere to be seen. Unless there's extenuating circumstances, then that kind of walks back some of Miyoko's development too.
ヒコリンは?
Unless that's really the lingering cause of her distancing herself from Natsuhiko too. Without answering Yuri's question, the professor asked her a question of her own.
ところでユーリちゃん、目覚めて早々申し訳ないんだけど、簡単な検査に付き合ってもらえるかしら。
検査?
今回の一件でユーリちゃんの体に問題が生じてないか調べなくちゃいけないの。ユーリちゃんたちは危険な粒子を浴びてしまったから。
Yuuri didn't know what hazardous particles were, and her head felt a little groggy, but she answered obediently nonetheless.
わかりました.
Afterwards, Yuuri underwent various tests. They took blood and urine samples and put her inside a giant machine to take pictures of what was inside her head. At first, Dr. Tenkawa seemed the same as usual, but as the test progressed, the look on her face froze over. Oh!
ユーリちゃんの IGF2R 遺伝子がタイプ S?
Dr. Tenkawa perused the test results on a PDA as she spoke with someone who appeared to be an assistant.
そんなわけはないわ。間違いではないの。
しかし、何度検査しても同じ結果でタイプ S と出るのです。
まさかそんな。
Professor turned to Yuuri with a serious look on her face and asked her a question.
ユーリちゃん、あなた BC の適正度っていくつだった？学校とかで測ったことあるでしょ？
C ですけど。
As the professor sunk into silence, her assistant whispered into her ear.
彼女の言うことに間違いはありません。過去の検査記録にも彼女の IGF2R 遺伝子はタイプ C と記録されていました。
So the IGF2R gene is your BC aptitude.
ちょっと待ちなさい。ということは、遺伝子が変異したっていうこと？
Even the look on the assistant's face changed when she said that last word.
ユーリちゃん、テレパシー使ってみてくれる？
でも私テレパシーはまだ。
そうだと思うけど、やってみてほしいの。おばさんに伝えたいことを何でもいいから強く念じて。
It was hard to think of something on the spot like that, but Yuuri did as she was told. Never used telepathy before, but let's see.
ヒコリンは大丈夫そうですか?
Professor audibly gasped. At the same time, Yuuri felt something strange as well. It felt completely different from all the times she had tried and failed to use telepathy before. It's almost like the thoughts she had weaved inside her head had spewed out. Bleh.
ユーリちゃん、夏彦が心配なのね。
Professor responded to Yuri's question. A question she only thought of inside her head.
では今から その質問の答えを私が頭に思い浮かべるわ。それを BC で読み取ってみて。
それってエンパシー。
いいからお願い。
Why? I can't pull that off. Mashrodon said hardly any kids out there can use empathy. Even so, Yuuri focused hard to try and read the professor's mind. And soon enough, Yuuri heard a voice echoing inside her head.
夏彦は別室で眠ってる。何も心配することはないわ。
This time, Yuuri was surprised for sure. The professor hadn't moved her mouth at all, and yet Yuuri heard her voice. Mental voice. Yuuri relayed what she heard from that voice back to the professor.
ヒコリンはお休み中なんですか？
そうよ。その通りよ。
Man, this BC stuff's easy as hell. The assistant spoke up mere moments after the professor had just barely managed to wring those words out.
博士、これは。
信じがたいけど、早くもテレパシーとエンパシーが発現しているようだわ。もう疑う余地はない。後天性の適精度 S コミュニケーターよ。
しかし、なぜこんなことが？
事故発生当時、第5エリアの WX 粒子エネルギー量は最大9500ミリスカラーバリュー。それによって破壊された遺伝子が当該環境下に適合するように再構築されたのよ。理論上起こりうるとされていた現象がまさかこのような形で実現するとはね。
I suppose if you already have some aptitude, and we've seen that those with communicator aptitude weren't affected by the high WX particle level. So there's some sense to that.
ならばまさか一緒にいた少年も。
その可能性も否めないわ。
Professor looked at Yuuri and spoke in a low voice.
ユーリちゃん、悪いけどこのお部屋でちょっと待っててね。おばさん夏彦の検査もしてくるから。
なんか良くなかったんでしょうか？
本来ならいい結果なのだとは思うけど、とにかくまた後でね。
With that, Dr. Tenkawa and her assistant left the room. Left all alone, Yuuri suddenly felt very scared. Even an easygoing person like her could tell. Things were about to get out of hand somehow. Several hours later, Yuuri was waiting patiently in the hospital room. But Dr. Tenkawa still hadn't come back, leaving Yuuri in the dark as to Natsuhiko's condition. As she waited in the silence, she eventually heard a commotion outside the hospital room. The sound of many footsteps. People were swiftly approaching her hospital room. Huh? What? Footsteps were rough and violent, which scared Yuuri a little.
この病室の患者ですか？ああ、院長と話はついている。この病棟にも他に患者はいない。心置きなく搬出してくれ。
Whispers could be heard in front of the room. Just then, a pitter-patter of rushing footsteps added to the cacophony. Suddenly, a new voice yelled out.
ちょっとあなた方、何をしているの？
It was Dr. Tenkawa's voice. Yuuri felt a little relieved, but she was still scared. She didn't want to go out to check the situation. She didn't want to go check out the situation outside for herself.
エリグチさん、保安ロッカーまで動員して何のつもり？
上の指示ですよ。本日をもって元の有利は当ラボの第4号被験体に登録されました。
What?
なんですって？冗談ですよ。この子は息子の友達なのよ。
ラボの頭脳たる天川美代子上級研究員とも思えない発言ですな。 世界中見渡しても極めて稀な S 級コミュニケーター。それがどれほどの危険性を持つかわからないあなたではないでしょう。
私の息子も被験体にするつもりね。
もちろんです。個人的感情を優先し、それを野放しにするなど、そんな身勝手が許されるわけがない。
Oh.
ふざけないで。
Okay, good. I guess my biggest worry was that Miyoko willingly had some hand in this. It doesn't seem like it.
先日の一件といい、近頃のラボは倫理が欠落しているわ。これ以上それが続くようなら消火局に告発するわよ。
それができないことは分かってますよね。ご子息の身の安全を考えると。
A heavy silence fell upon them. Eventually, Dr. Tenkawa muttered in a stifled voice.
ユーリちゃんはまだ火災の後遺症で動ける状態じゃないわ。ラボへの輸送は彼女の体に大きな負担を強いることになる。ヘリビッちゃん、保安ロッカーの方々に連れて今日は帰りなさい。
まあいいでしょう。今日のところは天川博士の顔を立てます。また来ますよ。
With those words, the sound of several footsteps faded into the distance. Once Yuuri could no longer hear them. The hospital door opened and Dr. Tenkawa came in.
博士。
ユーリちゃん。
Professor smiled weakly as she walked on over to Yuuri.
聞こえた？今の会話。
はい。よくわからないところが多かったですけど、困ったことになったんでしょうか。
そうね。
The professor sighed deeply.
教えてください。私たちに何が起きたんですか？
The professor remained silent for a while before speaking with a resigned tone of voice.
ユリちゃん、あなたと夏彦は今回の事故の影響で遺伝子が変異してしまったの。
遺伝子？
あなたの体を構成する、そう、設計図のようなもの。その中の IGF2R 遺伝子という BC の使用に関する遺伝子が施設内に蔓延した粒子により破壊、再構築されて BC の適正度が C から S まで上がったのよ。通常なら生涯変わることのないはずの適正度。
Yuuri stared blankly. She didn't quite understand what the professor was saying. The professor then continued.
昼間 BC が使えるかどうかのテストをしたでしょ。
はい。
訓練を要さずテレパシーとエンパシーを使えるようになった。あの結果に全てが現れていたわ。あなたは世界でもトップクラスのコミュニケーターになってしまったのよ。これは前例のない出来事なの。なのにあなただけではなく夏彦も同様に適正度 S に変異してしまった。能力もそれに伴い急上昇してる。今のところ私しか認識していないようだけど、夏彦もあの火災の時テレパシーを使っていたものね。
はい。
でもその結果あなたたちはラボに目をつけられてしまった。ユーリちゃんも夏彦もラボ内に幽閉される。
幽閉？
閉じ込められて BC 研究の被験体にさせられるのよ。ラボは原子力研究所ではなくて本当は BC の研究所なの。私もそこで原子力の研究ではなく BC の研究をずっとやってきたのよ。なのにまさか 息子と息子の友達を幽閉させることになるなんて。
It wasn't as if Yuuri understood everything the professor was saying. But she did understand some of it. When she and Natsuhiko were cornered by the fire in Leibo, she felt as if she had heard Natsuhiko's telepathy. It turns out she hadn't been hearing things after all. The two of them had been reborn as elite communicators. And as a result, they would have to live the rest of their lives locked away.
やめてもらうことはできないんですか？
ごめんなさい。きっと理解できないとは思うけど、そうせざるを得ない理由もあるの。あなたたちが得てしまった能力が危険なのは確かだから。
Dr. Tenkawa answered painfully. But if there was no other way, then...
博士、閉じ込められるのって2人も必要なんでしょうか？
どういう意味？
Yuuri stated her own thoughts as the professor looked on, confused.
私がおとなしくラボに行く代わりにヒコリンだけでも自由にしてもらうっていうのは。
Oh.
可能かもしれない。幸い夏彦はまだ目を覚ましていない。事情を知らないうちならなんとか。だけどユーリちゃんはそれでいいの？
いいんです。ヒコリンは私を助けてくれたから。だから今度は私の番です。
That was the moment Yuuri decided her own fate. 2 days later, when Yuuri was transferred to Leibo, Dr. Tenkawa informed her of the news.
夏彦にはあなたがあの火災で死んだと伝えたわ。
そうですか。
以後、夏彦は特別監視対象としてラボおよび政府機関の監視下に置かれることになったわ。ラボ内に幽閉されたあなたと社会の中で生きる夏彦、その2人のコミュニケーターの比較データを取る名目でなんとかそれを認めさせることができたの。もっとも夏彦が一定以上の能力レベルに達したら直ちにここに移送されるけれど。
Oh. That would be a desirable result for Yuuri, But Hikorin loves it outside. Because he's got lots of friends. He'd be sad if he got locked up inside. The professor spoke to Yuuri as she had that thought.
ユーリちゃん、あなたがもし望むのならやっぱり夏彦も一緒に。いいえ、
いいんです。
Yuuri smiled at the professor.
でもその代わり一つだけお願いが。
何？
ほんのたまにでいいから1年に1度とかでもいいからヒコリンに会わせてください。それだけで私は十分です。
約束するわ。
Someone tells me that's not gonna happen. The professor's words softly shook the surrounding air. That memory had left Natsuhiko at a loss for words. Hey, what the hell's this? It was a truth far beyond his expectations. They would try to incarcerate us as test subjects. Not just Yuuri, but me too. Yuuri sacrificed her freedom for my sake. Even though his own senses were supposed to have faded away, he could have sworn he felt his heart pounding like an alarm bell. Then, what happened to Yuuri afterwards? As that thought crossed Natsuhiko's mind, more and more visions floated before his eyes. Yuri's life turned upside down after that. Leibo became her new residence, and her lifestyle now revolved around experiments. I'm the demon. In one of Leibo's laboratories, the professor gazed at Yuuri and spoke.
いい？ユーリちゃん、あなたにはこれから BC 能力が開花するよう訓練を受けてもらうわ。
はい。
あなたはすでにテレパシーとエンパシーを身につけてる。だからその先の能力も 使えるようになってほしいの。
その先の能力ってテレパシーとエンパシーの他にも能力があるんですか？
一般には知られていないけどね。人と人の心をつなぐ第三の能力が存在するの。センシズシンパシー。それがその能力につけられた名称よ。適精度 S のコミュニケーターだけが発現しうる奇跡の力なの。
そんなの私にできるんでしょうか？
そんなに緊張しなくてもいいわ。タイプ S のコミュニケーターが現れたのは初めてではないし、センシズシンパシーという能力自体ももう何年も前に発見されているの。すでにその能力を身につけたコミュニケーターから採取されたデータと能力開発マニュアル、それに従って練習していけば必ず使えるようになるから。
頑張ります。
And thus the training began. Prepared, they first began with a lecture about the relationship between BC particles in the brain.
センシズシンパシーとは BC の究極の形よ。その作用を理解するにはまず BC 粒子というものの存在を知っておかなければならないわ。
Are we really gonna get lectured about this again?
粒子？
生物の思考情報、つまり心の動きを伝播する素粒子。
心の動き、目に見えないつぶつぶ。
こちらのモニターを見てちょうだい。図を見ながら説明するわ。
Esther operated her computer as she spoke, upon which the monitor began to display a diagram explaining the relationship between BC particles and the human mind.
BC 粒子というものはね、この世界の隅々に満ちているの。ユーリちゃんや私の頭の中にも、ユーリちゃんと私の間にも存在する。その粒子にも実はいろいろな種類があるのよ。通常時は何の情報も書き込まれていないワンダラー粒子、
Oh, okay.
通称 W 粒子と呼ばれる粒子だけがあるのだけど、
This is somewhat different to the explanation we got from Anna.
これが人の脳に触れると精神活動によって発生した情報エネルギーを帯び M 粒子という粒子に変異する。
Murder particles.
M 粒子は
Oh
マ
my.
インド粒子、心の情報が書き込まれた粒子よ。これら BC に関わる粒子を総称して BC 粒子というの。ちなみに他にも普段の WX 粒子や B 粒子というのもあるけれど、今は関係ないので説明を省くわ。
Oh, but I wanted to learn about WX particles.
でね、M 粒子は通常人間の脳内から出ることはないんだけど、コミュニケーターが BC を発動すると脳内の M 粒子のエネルギーが上昇、周囲の W 粒子にも作用を及ぼし M 粒子に変異させていき、対象者の元まで届く。これが BC 能力発動の正確な原理よ。
So I stand, I look at my target, and I go, and then you get my M particles. The professor's lecture was more detailed than what high school students learned in school, but naturally Yuuri didn't understand,
博士、
because she's nowhere near high school yet. Unintentional break, but I usually do need a break in the middle of large plot dumps.
今とか食べるとかいろいろあって難しいです。
あら、ごめんなさい。ではもっと用語を簡略化して説明するわね。とりあえず全部ひっくるめて BC 粒子という言い方でも基本的に問題はないから。
それならなんとかわかります。
よかったわ。では次に BC 粒子と能力の関係の話をするわね。例えばテレパシーの場合、 BC 粒子がユーリちゃんの心を私に伝えることによって成立するの。エンパシーの場合はその逆、 BC 粒子が伝えた私の心をユーリちゃんが受け取ることによって成立するわ。 だけどセンシズシンパシーというのは BC 粒子を介し他者の思考情報をすべてかつ継続的に観測し続ける能力なの。対象者が目で見たもの、耳で聞いた音、心で考えたこと、五感のすべての情報を能力者は知り続ける。
人の心の動きを丸ごと全部ずっと知っちゃえるってことですか？
正解よ。つまりあなたの頭脳を BC 粒子を媒介にして他者の頭脳と完全に連結するってことね。
I feel like if you wanted to make a really simple explanation for kids, you could take like a star map with 2 planets on it and just connect the dots between 2 planets. Say, all right, the stars are BC particles. When you use telepathy, you take your message and just connect the dots from your mind to the target's mind, and you deliver your message. Empathy is the opposite of that. You pull from the target's mind to your mind by connecting the dots. And for a sense of sympathy, you just connect the dots and leave the connection there.
いわば PC と PC を LAN の回線でつなぐかのように。
When you do untargeted telepathy, you just send it, draw all the lines around you, through all the stars.
その時、ユーリちゃん自身の感覚は消失し、代わりに他者の五感を通じて世界を認識するのよ。
お化けになって誰かに乗り移るみたいな感じなのかな。
私は幽霊など信じないけど、おそらくそうした感覚に近いでしょうね。まずはそれができるまで頑張ってみましょう。私がずっとつきっきりになるから。では始めるわ。感覚同調思考実験第1回フェーズ1アクト。
And just as the professor had told her to, Yuuri partook in the experiments that day, the next day, and the next day, and the day after that.
それではユーリちゃん、再度やってみましょう。感覚同調思考実験第1026回フェーズ1アクト。
はい、行きます。
Yuuri focused with all her mind. Tried to connect to the professor in front of her. At that moment... Vision swayed in an instant. What she saw completely changed. She was looking at herself through the professor's point of view.
博士、できました。
え？
今、私の顔が見えました。これって成功したってことですよね。
The professor's eyes widened. Her surprise soon changed into a smile.
すごいわ、ユーリちゃん。たった1ヶ月でここまでたどり着くなんて。
これでいいんでしょうか。
You still have 9 years until the present.
最高よ。あなたは天才だわ。
The professor hugged Yuuri. Wrapped in the warmth of those arms, Yuuri smiled in relief. The professor was always kind to Yuuri and spent much time with her, both in and out of experiments. Perhaps as a result, Yuuri gradually eased into her new life. With that success, the experiments continued further.
昨日ユーリちゃんが身につけたセンシズシンパシーは BC の本来の形なのよ。実はテレパシーとエンパシーはその能力の未熟な形に過ぎない。 BC 粒子を媒介に対象者の頭脳を完全に能力者の監視下に置く。これがどういう原理で起こるのか説明するわね。
The professor operated the computer as she spoke, upon which the monitor displayed the same diagram she previously used to explain the mechanism of BC.
脳で行うあらゆる精神活動の情報は脳内の BC 粒子と常に相互作用を及ぼしているわ。五感で知覚した情報、頭で考えた思考、それはすべて脳内の BC 粒子にコピーされる。逆に BC 粒子が持つ情報は常に脳に影響を及ぼす。それが脳と脳内の BC 粒子の関係。
What?
それでセンシズシンパシーの能力使用者は対象者の脳内の BC 粒子の情報をすべて知覚することができる。
パワーアップしたエンパシーですね。
Okay, yeah.
おおむね正解よ。普通エンパシーは対象者が心を開いていないと使えないけど、その問題もクリアできる。エンパシー使用時のノイズは脳にあらかじめ備えられた自己防衛機能によるものだと考えられているのだけど、感覚を完全に同調させることによってその防衛機能も働かなくなるらしいのね。
つまり誰の心でも自由に読めちゃうってことですね。
そう。ただエンパシーと違うのはそれだけじゃない。決定的に違うのは対象者が現在知覚している情報だけではなく、過去の記憶まで遡って知ることができるっていうこと。
記憶も？
そう。記憶も当然脳内に存在する情報の一種ですもの。能力者は対象者の過去を知りたいと思うだけでその記憶をすべて見ることができるのよ。そしてさらには
We have all this stuff, and we all have all this stuff with intracerebral BC particles, and B particles, and W particles, and M particles, and the answer to the question of how you read a target's memories is just, you just want to. That's it. You just want to read their memories, and you can. That's the answer.
自分の脳内の情報を相手に伝えることもできる。能力者が発した強力な情報エネルギーは対象者の脳内の BC 粒子にまで伝わり、その BC 粒子が対象者の脳に作用を及ぼし、まやかしの知覚情報を生み出すの。しかも聴覚情報だけではなく、視覚、嗅覚、味覚、触覚など五感のすべてを錯覚させることもできる。
Remember when we thought the current route was really cool because Natsuhiko figured all this out organically? And now we have to sit through an explanation of it all?
こっちはパワーアップしたテレパシー？
Which doesn't really tell us anything, it's just, we're hearing a lot of stuff that we already know.
正解。幻聴を聞かせるだけではなく、その気になれば原子なども見せることが可能なのよ。無論現在の知覚情報を錯覚させるだけじゃない。過去の記憶の中にも錯覚を生み出すことが可能なのよ。これがセンシズシンパシーという能力のすべてよ。理解できたかしら？
なるほど。すごい能力だってことは分かりました。
We want to help you develop this ability, but you're also gonna be locked up in here.
そう。凄まじい能力なのよ。ゆうりちゃん、この2つの能力を組み合わせるととんでもないことができることに気づかない？対象者の記憶を覗き見ることができて、さらにその中に錯覚を起こせるということは、 人の記憶を操作できるってことよ。本来の記憶を別の記憶に差し替えたり、さらには記憶を消去したり。
そんなことができるんですか？私にも？
ええ、全ての BC 能力を身につけた者だけができる最高難度の技術よ。私たちが知る限り、それに成功したコミュニケーターは世界に2人しかいない。だけどその能力は確かに存在するの。 BC とは情報を操る能力。そして人の頭脳の中には情報が詰まっている。センシズシンパシーを完全にものにしたなら、人の脳内で起こるあらゆる作用を操作できるようになる。情報を支配するマクスウェルの悪魔のようにね。
Professor looked Yuri in the eye.
ユーリちゃん、あなたは人を超えた存在になるのよ。
人を超えた存在。
She had no desire of her own to become something like that, but if it would please the professor, she would try her best to give it a shot. At long last, the memory manipulation clinical experiments on mice began.
ユーリちゃん、マウスの脳は人の脳より単純な仕組みになっているわ。記憶している情報の数もずっと少ない。その過去の情報に対し消えろと強く念じれば、マウスの記憶は消えてくれるはずよ。
As the professor spoke, she pointed to a small corner in the room. There was a small mouse cage with a tiny labyrinth inside.
そのマウスはね、何度も迷路を通過させることで正しい順路を覚えた学習マウスよ。今日はマウスの記憶消去をしてみましょう。
ネズミさん、せっかく覚えたのに。
かわいそうだけど、このマウスは賢いからすぐまた覚えられるわよ。
わかりました。やります。
Yuri walked up to the cage and tried using sense of sympathy on the mouse. Mouse's simple, abstract thoughts flowed into Yuri's mind. He searched through the mouse's memory to find the maze route. It was a process similar to recalling one's own memories. Which one of these is the maze route? At that moment, right before Yuri's eyes, floated the mouse's memory of running around inside the maze. Just need to erase this, huh? Yuri wished with all her willpower for that memory to disappear. That very instant, an intense pain ran through her. Yuri returned to reality in a shock. The mouse went limp in the cage.
博士、ネズミさんが。
心配ないわ。気絶しているだけよ。
でもどうして？
マウスの脳内にもともとあった記憶というのは強力な情報エネルギーの塊なの。それは現在知覚している五感の情報などとはわけが違う。一瞬で消えていくことなく脳内にとどまり続けているものだから、記憶消去を行う際はその記憶に対しさらに強力な消えろという情報エネルギーをぶつけているわけ。すると脳内では激烈な作用が起こる。普通は絶対に起こりえないような一瞬で記憶が消えるという現象を強制的に起こすのだから当然よね。故に記憶消去を行う際は脳へのダメージが伴うのよ。
Yuri looked at the mouse with feelings of guilt in her heart.
自分の力が恐ろしい。脳内の情報を操作できるということはこんなこともできてしまうということよ。適精度 S のコミュニケーターが恐れられる理由、少しだけ分かってもらえたかしら。
We're gonna help you train this horrible ability, but we can't let you out in the world with this horrible ability. We have to keep you locked up. I know that the only reason they're training it is so they can study it. As Yuri hung her head in shame, the professor hugged her shoulders and spoke gently to her.
今日の実験はここまでにしましょう。
Yuuri nodded softly, her heart fearfully throbbing in pain. That was the only time Yuuri felt such pain. Her days devoted to experimentation went by fairly calmly after that. Before she had realized it, 3 months had passed since Yuuri had come to Labo. A personal bedroom had been made for Yuuri underneath the Labo. As she surveyed her new room, Yuuri thought to herself, there's a lot more stuff here now, huh? Dr. Tenkawa did her best to accommodate Yuuri. She gave Yuuri everything she wanted, girly clothes, piles of books, anything. It's a little inconvenient, but it's a lot better than the life I had lived before. Just that thought that passed through Yuri's head, the room door opened and Dr. Tenkawa came in. Jesus Christ, the room door scared me.
Yuuri-chan, 実験の時間よ。
Yuuri smiled and replied to the professor's gentle voice. According to Dr. Tenkawa, Yuri's real parents had been told directly after the accident that their daughter had died due to the fire. They apparently accepted the explanation without question and left town immediately. Since they were by no means nice parents, Yuuri was not at all sad that she could no longer see them. She was actually happier to be showered with plenty of love from Dr. Tenkawa instead. Yuuri went with the professor to the laboratory in Area 5.
今日は何をやるんですか？
昨日に続いて記憶操作の実験よ。
よーし、私頑張りますね。
After knocking the mouse unconscious, Yuuri underwent various other memory manipulation training sessions. They seemed to be a continuation of that, but...
さて、今日は私が対象者になるわ。記憶操作というものを好みで体験してみたくてね。
でも危なくないですか？
心配しないで。ほんの数秒分の記憶を消去しても大したダメージはないはずよ。
わかりました。じゃあまず記憶の消去から。
As Yuuri spoke, she took a pen and wrote a few letters on a piece of paper. When Yuuri finished writing Orihime, she showed the piece of paper to the professor.
それじゃあ博士、これを覚えてください。
織姫ね。よし、覚えたわ。
それじゃあ行きますよ。記憶の消去。
Yuuri reached out her hand and touched the professor's cheek. That very same moment, the professor's consciousness streamed into Yuri's brain. She called out the memory she wanted from among the extensive collection of complicated memories. Now this must be it. What? Why are we... what?
織姫ね。よし、覚えたわ。
It was a vision of what happened about 10 seconds ago, but from Dr. Tenkawa's point of view. Erase this memory. Yuuri focused hard and destroyed that part of the memory.
覚えたわ。ね。よし。あ。ね。
Meaning of the word disappeared and the visuals became covered with static. Memory disintegrated into dust and disappeared into the darkness of the professor's consciousness. When Yuuri returned to reality, she saw the professor groan in pain.
大丈夫ですか？
ちょっと頭が痛んだわ。でも大丈夫。全く心配ないわよ。
Yuuri was relieved to hear the professor's words.
それじゃあ質問です。さっき私はなんて書いたでしょう？
There was a stumped look on the professor's normally wise and intellectual face. Yuuri found it somewhat amusing, so she teased her.
時間切れ。答えは織姫です。
あ、織姫ね。よし、今度こそ覚えたわ。
それじゃあ今度は記憶の操作です。
はい、いつでもどうぞ。
弾きますよ。
Yuuri wished strongly to connect with the professor's mind. Are we really gonna do this every time? Once again, the professor's consciousness streamed into Yuri's brain. The only reason I'm griping about that is because I have to edit that video into the recording every time. Every time. Because OBS does not pick that up. Yuri called out the memory of a few seconds ago.
織姫ね。よし、今度こそ覚えたわ。
Changed his memory. Yuri focused hard and...
あ、織姫ね。よし、今度こそ覚えたわ。あ、ね。よし、今度こそ覚えたわ。あ、彦星ね。よし、今度こそ覚えたわ。
Vision of the memory warped itself into another memory. Remember Natsuhiko having to fight harder to actually construct the words that he wanted in the target's voices when he was reconstructing memories. But this just happened. When Yuri returned to reality, the professor looked blankly at her.
あら、もしかしてもう終わった？
はい、それじゃあ質問です。さっき私はあの紙に何て書いたでしょう？
彦星でしょ？
The professor answered as if it were obvious. But Yuri smiled impishly and revealed the paper to the professor.
ブブー、答えは織姫です。
あ、本当だわ。
The professor stared fixedly at the word Orihime written on the paper.
実際に体験するとなんだか不思議ね。
でしょうね。
As Yuri and the professor smiled at each other, a sharp voice suddenly bellowed.
何をやっているのですか、天下博士。
The voice came from the speaker installed in the ceiling of the laboratory.
あら、うるさいのが現れたわね。
The laboratory was monitored in a different room via cameras. The professor turned to the camera and answered in irritation.
記憶操作実験の許可は昨日のうちに提出しておいたわよ。何か問題が？
あなたが対象者になるとは聞いてません。被験体 Y2 と接するときは AD の投与が義務付けられているはずです。そもそも自ら実験体になるなど推奨は過ぎますよ。あなたの頭脳にダメージが残ったらどうするつもりなんですか？
動物実験を十二分に済ませ、危険はないと実証されたわ。研究を進めるためよ。いちいち目くじらを立てないで。
Once Dr. Tenkawa finished speaking, the speakers cut out. Something about that exchange felt strange to Yuri. Why was the professor so insistent to perform experiments on herself?
博士、どうしてこんなことをするんですか？
The professor slowly looked back and spoke to Yuri.
実はね、ユーリちゃん。あなたに一つお願いしたいことがあるの。今、夏彦の身に大変なことが起きているのよ。
ヒコリンに何があったんですか？
口では説明しがたいことなの。だから私の記憶に潜って直接確かめて。事故の後の夏彦についての記憶、それを見ればあの子の現状がわかるわ。
はい。
Yuri timidly dove into the professor's memory. Oh, come on. It's a memory of right around 3 months ago. In it, Natsuhiko was lying in a bed in a hospital room at Rokame City Hospital. We're going deeper. But he wasn't asleep. He was frozen still, his eyes blankly open. Beside him were the professor, as well as Mashiro.
夏彦。
Mashiro called out to Natsuhiko, but there was no response.
ねえ、どうしちゃったの、夏彦。
We have to recap all the plot.
聞こえてないわ。
We have to recap all the plot to every character before we can go anywhere. To be here for a while.
ユーリちゃんの死を知ってからずっとこうなの。 ましろちゃんだけじゃない。私の声も医師の声も誰の声も届かない。
We had to play through all this to get to this point. Why are we doing this again?
事実を認められず心を閉ざしてしまったんだわ。
Wait. Okay, that was short. But that's 6 now. Yuuri was still shocked when she returned to reality. She couldn't believe that such a cheery and energetic boy like Natsuhiko could end up in that state.
夏彦は本当にあなたのことが好きだったのね。かわいそうな子よ。全部嘘なのに。
That's just...
私たちがついた嘘のせいで心が押しつぶされてしまうなんて。
So we're gonna make another lie to cover our lie, and that's to make Yuuri manipulate his memories so that Yuuri never died. Yuuri wanted to save Natsuhiko. That was why she sacrificed her freedom in his place. So why? Why did this have to happen? That was a question that likely nobody could answer. But even so, Yuuri spoke to the one person she could rely on.
私思ってなかった。こんなことになるなんて思ってなかったんです。どうすればいいんですか？どうすればヒコリンは。そうだ、私が生きていることをちゃんと伝えてあげれば。そうすればヒコリンも。
それはできないのよ。あなたの存在は今やラボにとっての最重要秘匿事項なの。あなたの生存を夏彦に伝えてしまったらラボは確実に夏彦をも幽閉してしまうわ。それに第一、生存を伝える手段もない。何も認識していないのだから。
じゃあヒコリンはあのまま生きていくしかないんですか？
When Yuuri asked her that question, the professor shook her head.
いいえ、一つだけ方法。ユーリちゃん、あなたはこの3ヶ月 BC 能力を鍛え続けてきたわね。その力を使えばあるいは夏彦を救うことができるかもしれない。
The professor's words shook Yuuri.
博士、私に何をさせたいんですか？
あなたの力で夏彦の脳内からあなたと過ごした思い出をすべて消して。
Oh. That was the professor's plan. Rather, even if the professor hadn't told her, Yuuri had thought of that method as well. It was his memories of me that made Hikorin turn out this way. So to set Hikorin free. Soon enough, Yuuri answered in a faint voice.
それでヒコリンが元に戻ってくれるなら。
That night, Natsuhiko was transferred from Rokame City Hospital to Labo. He was laid on a bed in the neuroscience laboratory. Yuuri and the professor stood next to him and looked at his face. Natsuhiko didn't respond to Yuri's presence. His eyes were shut.
薬で眠らせているわ。今のうちに記憶を操作すれば操作されたことも自覚せずに済むから。
Still took some time for Yuuri to find her resolve. After a long period of silence, she spoke resolutely.
やれます。
そう。では始めて、ユーリちゃん。
はい。
Yuuri nodded and looked at the sleeping boy's face. So it's time to say goodbye, Hikorin. Yuri's mind was calm. Resolved herself to be calm at least just this once. Even if you forget about me, I'll never forget about you, Hikorin. But how sadder and lonely the rest of her days would be. She burned the image of his sleeping face in her mind, lest she forget about this day. Bye. Finally, Yuuri reached out her hand, touched Natsuhiko's forehead. Just then, Countless visions floated before Yuri's eyes. There were memories that were not her own. Rather, they were Natsuhiko's memories of her. Yuri peered into the first of them. I'm not splicing these in. That's fucking ridiculous. It was the memory of the day Yuuri and Natsuhiko first met.
なあなあ、なんで泣いてるの？
We played the after route from Natsuhiko's perspective. Now we have to play the before route from Yuri's perspective.
僕、夏彦。
夏彦くん？
お前、ことの有利だろ？ちょっと前に近くに引っ越してきた。友達になろうよ。せっかくご近所なんだからさ。
It was a memory that Yuri fondly remembered herself, except this time she saw it through Natsuhiko's point of view. This sure brings me back, Hikurin. You surprised me at first, you know. You pulled out to me so suddenly that you seemed like kind of a rough boy to me. But you know I was happy. It's thanks to you every day after that was a fun day for me. She couldn't just keep gazing at this memory forever. Yuri focused hard to erase this memory. Soon enough the vision grew hazy.
お前、ことのだろ？だ。
And disappeared. At the same time, Yuri heard what sounded like Natsuhiko screaming. Even though he was stupefied, he probably still felt the damage of memory erasure. I'm sorry, Hikurin. I'm so sorry. Yuri hardened her heart and transferred her consciousness to the next memory, upon which a different vision floated before her.
有利は大きくなったら何になるの？
It was a memory of a conversation they had quite a while after they met. Yuri thought, oh, I almost forgot this happened.
大きくなったら？
僕はいろいろなりたいものがあって迷ってるんだけどさ。
私はね、ヒコリンのお嫁さんになりたいな。
Oh, this didn't happen before.
ダメ？ヒコリン、私のこと嫌い？
嫌いじゃないよ。だけど。
It was a silly little conversation that only young children could have. Hikurin was so embarrassed. How cute. Yuri felt a little embarrassed herself. Unfortunately, this memory could not be allowed to remain. Yuri wished hard for it to disappear. And thus, yet another memory of Yuri vanished from Natsuhiko's brain. Okay, that's 2 down. Her work was proceeding smoothly. Yet Yuri's heart throbbed in intense pain. She felt as if with each memory she erased, she tore open a void in her own mind. Even though it wasn't her own memories she was erasing. There's still lots more to go. I gotta keep it up. Yuri encouraged herself to continue with her work.
いやー、面白かったね。
最後まで読んじゃったね。この写真、夏彦くんのお母さん？
え？ああ、うん。
Everything's dated. That's cool.
私ね、コミュニケーターで良かったと思うことが一つあるよ。
え？
それはね、夏彦くんに会えたこと。コミュニケーターじゃなかったらこの町に引っ越してこられなかったもんね。
One by one the visions came. One by one she erased them. Huh. Though I am realizing there's something to say about these being the memories that Natsuhiko recalled during the before route. That's just literally memories that came back in the course of regaining himself. You know what? Once again, I've turned a corner on it. That's a neat twist. That's neat. I just think it's a neat. we got a ways to go on Yuuri's story, I guess. Let's just read some tips. BC, short for Beyond Communication. Means of communicating intentions through information in its pure form via atmospheric BC particles, without using words as an intermediary. In the past, BC was called Extrasensory Perception, or ESP. But after the 2014 Andresi witch hunt, its existence was brought to light, and BC was rapidly clarified and systematized. People with BC abilities are called communicators. There are 3 documented BC abilities. Conveying one's intentions to others is called telepathy. Reading the minds of others is called empathy. Synchronizing with the minds of others is called senses sympathy, but knowledge of this ability is hidden from the general public. In the communicator-exclusive school Rokumi Academy, the curriculum is tailored for the development of these abilities. However, since BC usage somewhat dampens the user's senses, students are guided to maintain a reasonable range when using the abilities on campus. The extent of results a particular communicator can expect to achieve through training can be estimated through their aptitude rank. However, there is no effective means of measuring ability level without reliance on self-reporting. So much is uncertain about BC that some experts even deem it to have the power to glimpse into another world. It will probably take some time before proper standardized methods of training and developing these abilities are established. Another world, huh? Is that going to be what we're building up to? BC particles? A general term for the 4 kinds of information-containing particles that fill the human brain. Since human thought is a type of information, these BC particles themselves are the source of human consciousness. In other words, the spirit lies within these particles. M particles? A new type of Fermi particle that takes on BC energy interactions. Since these particles form human thought, they are named M for mind. 2 of the fundamental interactions, the strong force and the weak force, do not affect these particles. These particles require high levels of energy to remain stable. While they may be safe inside the treasure trove of information that is the brain, M particles immediately decay into W particles after leaving the brain. That's why ordinary people cannot relay thoughts without using an intermediary like speech or writing. Only communicators can use BC to convert W particles into M particles intracerebrally. W particles, a new type of Fermi particle even smaller than the tiny neutrino. With a low energy state, W particles are unaffected by gravitational, strong, weak, and electromagnetic forces. Thus have yet to be discovered. W stands for Wanderer, as W particles drift through the air without information. While W particles cannot reproduce information by themselves, a communicator can load them with information similar to human mental activity, like consciousness, intentions, or thoughts, converting the W particles into high energy state M particles, otherwise WX particles. In this state, they are now affected by electromagnetic forces. B particles. Bosonic particles that transmit BC energy, information volume. The informational field hypothesis proposed the existence of such particles, but just like gravitons, they have not yet been observed. One of the components of the hypothesis that cannot escape the limitations of a hypothesis incidentally, the fundamental process of BC energy generation uses the internal heat energy of the body. The existence of high metabolism heavy eaters who stay thin, communicator and non-communicator alike, perhaps partially be explained due to this property. High levels of energy. I don't follow. Are these the things that make the particles go? WX particles. Artificially amplified W particles. X stands for extreme! These particles have surpassed the energy threshold for becoming M particles, but lack any information meaningful to humans. This is where the distinction is drawn. When a communicator uses WX particles to produce M particles, resulting particles take longer to decay than if they have used W particles instead. In effect, a WX particle-rich environment increases effective BC range. However, WX particles have been proven to be harmful to the body. Thus, extended exposure to fixed amounts can cause brain dysfunction, genetic disorders, and cancer, while acute exposure can cause sensory abnormalities, nausea, and hazy consciousness. Does it affect those with communicator aptitude? The third BC ability, hidden from public knowledge. It is a dangerous ability where the Esper reads the senses and BC energy frequency of the target and synchronizes them with their own, allowing the Esper to emulate the target's consciousness. Apparently we all have BC energy frequencies. Apparently we all have BC particles in our brains, which the communicator can just target. The Esper is given real-time access to the target's memories, emotions, qualia, and point of view, among other things. Additionally, by manipulating the target's intracerebral M particles, the Esper can twist and erase the target's memories at will. Furthermore, forced synchronization of the senses and frequencies puts the target in a false state of an open heart, meaning that unlike with empathy, the Esper is not limited to targets who open their hearts to them. When senses sympathy is in use, the Esper's senses dampen considerably, since they make their BC energy frequency match that of their target. Esper's identity is at the risk of a collapse. Overuse of the ability dramatically increases the risk of N-ification. What is that? Thus, use of the ability poses major problems for both Esper and target alike. At present, little is known as to how to use the ability both safely and effectively. As a result, the government continues to hide that ability's existence from the general public to prevent needless discrimination and panic. As a digression, the act of using senses sympathy to read and influence the content of a target's memories is called RAM by certain BC researchers. Rewrite addition to memory. RAM also refers to a computer's main memory, random access memory. Simply put, it is storage space for a computer's short-term memories. RAM is equipped on not just personal computers, but things like home video game consoles as well. The specialists who named the communicator's RAM process perhaps deliberately named it for its similarity to how a computer accesses and modifies information in memory in real time. Yeah, that is clever. Summary of senses sympathy. Hacker voice. I'm in.